Full name and where you're from.
Violeta Magee, and I'm from former Yugoslavia. So we didn't really know. My parents applied, did all the paperwork, and we were accepted. And I just remember them getting a phone call and telling us we're going to Texas.
Did you know where Texas was?
No, but I've heard of it from all the movies. It was like the cowboy play. We watched movies. So we had no idea where or what it was really going to be like.
Welcome to the Hey Chaplain podcast. My name is Jared Altick, and I'm a chaplain with the police department. This show is commercial free because listeners like you buy me a $5 virtual coffee at buymeacoffee.com/heychaplain. You don't really even have to do that because you already get the show for free. But I appreciate it, and thank you. It really does mean the world to me. This podcast exists so that cops can hear encouragement from other cops. It may not be very often that you talk to a police chaplain, but I'm hoping that you might listen to a chaplain talk to other cops about being a wiser, healthier person. On this podcast, you'll hear from detectives and dispatchers, U.S. Marshals and county sheriffs, as well as the occasional detective from my hometown of Kansas City. From the LAPD to Scotland Yard, the guests on Hey Chaplain are giving you the wisdom gleaned from their experience so that you don't have to learn the hard way. In the United States, we have a long history of first-generation immigrants filling the ranks of first responders, both police and fire. So I wanted to capture a modern-day story of someone who came from a foreign country as a first-generation immigrant and was able to overcome culture shock and language barriers in order to have a successful career in law enforcement. Today, we're talking to Violeta Magee. Violeta and her family immigrated from the former Yugoslavia, coming from a war-torn nation to first the state of Texas, and then eventually to Kansas City, Kansas. I'm going to ask her about her experience immigrating and also overcoming that language barrier. And we're going to talk about her adjustment and also the adjustment of her family to American culture, as well as how she discovered law enforcement and how she got started in her career. Violeta is particularly interesting because she's now a major in our department. So she's risen up the ranks and been promoted several times. And I really appreciate how she advocates for law enforcement as a way to show kindness and goodness to people in a crisis situation. Here's Violeta Magee. Hello, Violeta. How are you today?
Hi, Chaplain. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm excited to get you in here today to come talk to me about your story because I know that there are a lot of police officers who are first-generation immigrants. They were born in another country. They came over with their family a lot of times as children, and they had to go through that whole process of learning English and adapting to a new culture and to a new country, and now they're in law enforcement. And that is, broadly speaking, your story. So can you tell me where you and your family are from originally?
Yes. So I was born in former Yugoslavia.
And how old were you when communism ended and the country broke up?
Yes, I was about 6 years old.
You know, what people groups made up the country of Yugoslavia?
Sure, you had Bosnians, Croatians, Serbians.
In all three of those groups, what made them different? What made them the same? Where was the source of the conflict?
A lot of it was war over territory based on religion. You had Catholics, Muslims, Serbian Orthodox.
Okay. So three distinct, different religious groups, and they all had their own historical territories. But when the country of Yugoslavia was made, which was kind of an artificial conglomeration of people, they were all forced together, and that didn't always go well. Although some families intermarried, right? And so there were some families that were mingled, and they were, part Christian, part Muslim, or part Catholic, part Orthodox.
So my family was one where my father and my mother were different religion.
Now, your family was there through the duration of the fighting. Is that right?
Yes, we were there, and during the war, we split up as a family.
Yeah.
So people moved based on who was taking over which town, territorial war, and my family had to split apart.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is when you were just a small child. I never asked you, do you have siblings?
I have one sister, yes.
Okay. Well, older or younger?
She is 4 years older.
So very scary, I'm sure, if your family have two young daughters and a war is happening and people are being killed and people being moved. Because when they were just Yugoslavs, they could live probably just about anywhere. But once the country started breaking up, then everybody, the Croatians had to go to Croatian territory and Serbians went to Serbian territory and that kind of thing.
Oh, I couldn't even imagine when my parents went through. Now that I'm older, that I was a child, so for them, that must have been a scary experience.
Yeah, you told me once before that there was an indication of when to get out, when danger was getting close. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So a lot of times people would know if one army would come in and take over the town, and people were getting killed inside their homes. For example, if your next door neighbor, like sometimes people would wake up and the whole family was dead, you knew that you might be the next home because, for example, whichever religion at that time was taking over that town, if you were not that religion or that army, you better move because you don't know if you would be next.
Yeah. They may move right on to your neighborhood or your street or whatever, and that put you in danger. I can't imagine. So your family was able, even though they were split, they were able to endure, they were able to survive, through the wartime. The war lasted from, what years?
From 91 to 95.
Okay. What prompted your family to leave the former Yugoslavia?
So my parents were split. We were living with my mother, my sister and I, and then my dad was on the other side of the country. We did not have any contact for at least 3 or 4 years. The phone lines were cut. We had no way to be together. After the war ended, certain cities were created. They were called like the mutual cities where families could come in together and meet. So after 3 or 4 years, that's seeing my dad, we met. And my dad and my mom talked about reuniting together as a family. And one of the options was United States. United States was taking families from this Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian war in order to unite the families that were split up.
Okay. So they had a potential option. They had a future if they'd go to another country. Did any of them speak English?
No, nobody did.
Oh, man. And the United States was the one offering, the visas to travel and that kind of thing, right?
Yes, United States was offering. So we didn't really know. My parents applied, did all the paperwork, and we were accepted. And I just remember them getting a phone call and telling us we're going to Texas.
Did you know where Texas was?
No, but I've heard of it from all the movies. It was like the cowboy play. We watched movies. So we had no idea where or what it was really going to be like.
And you were how old?
At that time, I was 11 years old.
Okay. So 11 years old, you're going to go to Texas, and there were charities that helped you travel. And so you got to the United States. Tell me about your first experience coming to the U.S.
Sure. So when we came here, we had like 2 bags. My mom and my dad had a luggage, and nobody spoke English. I was 11. My sister was 15. We came and we were placed in an empty apartment. The charities gave us an apartment, and we just had 1 box of food. I remember like cereal and peanut butter, things that I've never eaten before.
Right.
I just remember going through the box, like, what is this? What kind of food is this?
Was that a good experience?
It was it was exciting. I was a kid, so I've never seen these things. So it was kind of exciting. It was scary a little bit. So we tried to get out on foot the next day and just try to get some food. But I just remember we didn't even know how to order food. It was like some burger shop.
Right.
So it was a neat experience. It's scary, but it was kind of neat. And we made it. We came home with hamburgers. We did it.
Yeah.
It was 2 weeks prior to Thanksgiving that we came here.
Okay.
And this kind of goes along just a lot of kind acts and kind people through this journey. The pastor that helped us invited us to his home for Thanksgiving. And I remember Dallas Cowboys playing on Thanksgiving.
Of course, yeah.
And I was just impressed. I've never seen a TV that big.
Yeah.
And the food. And so that was kind of like the first introduction to United States. It was Thanksgiving.
What was it like meeting Americans?
Yeah. So one huge difference was everybody was just nice and friendly. We used to joke around, but when we would get out on the streets, I would look at my mom and say, Mom, why are people just saying hi to me? They don't know me.
Right.
People would just say hello and smile. So that was a big culture shock. And people were just nice. Maybe during the war, that's the memories that I have. I mean,
It wasn't that way.
It wasn't that way. A lot of times you wouldn't even be on the streets. You kind of kept close, but everybody was just very friendly.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Tell me about learning English.
I did not speak anything. That was very scary. I felt insecure and scared and alone. Because at that time I was 11 still. But I picked it up quickly. It was one of the best things that could have happened because I was able to just learn it. I was placed in a school. I had very great teachers that helped. For instance, I remember going to the cafeteria line. I'm assuming I had free lunch, so they wrote my social security number on this little card, and I would hand it to the cafeteria lady every day so I could get my lunch. One day she stopped me and she said, "Today, we're going to teach you how to say this. We're going to learn English." And to this day, I remember that small little act of kindness and her willing to teach me meant the world to me.
Very patient.
She was patient and she cared enough to help me.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. How did it go for your parents learning English?
So
that's got to be more difficult as adults, I'm sure.
Yes, it was. And they're both doing amazing right now. But it was hard. My older sister had to do a lot of translating. She almost took the adult role. So anything that came from schools, eventually my sister and I would have to translate for them, which I'm sure that's hard.
Right.
But she would have to help out. But they learned. They tried their hardest. They were working within a day or two of us being there. So they learned quickly.
You started out in Texas. How long were you in Texas?
8 months.
8 months. Okay. So you went through a school year and probably into the next summer. Mm-hmm. And yes. Then what caused you guys to move from Texas?
So the family that we got on the plane with to come to United States, we actually met this family from our country. They initially came to Texas with us. After about 8-9 months, they heard about Kansas City and how diverse it was and that there was a lot of immigrants. So they moved. And within a couple of months, we kind of followed where it seemed familiar.
Okay. There'd be other first and second generation immigrants from the same part of the world. And that's got to help. It's surely helped your parents to know that, hey, at least we'd have a few neighbors that speak our language. That I'm sure that helped to some degree, right?
Yes. It made it more comfortable. So
what was your first impression of Kansas City?
I loved it. I really did. The Four Seasons. The weather was beautiful. By that time, I've spoken some English, not fluent, but I could communicate.
Making progress.
I was making progress. When we first came to Kansas City, we had great people to help us from our country, same country. They helped us, found my parents jobs, sent me to school, or showed me where to go to school. So within a couple of months, we lived in a couple of different apartments within Kansas City area. After a couple of months, my parents decided that they should probably buy a house. So they were walking around and they saw the house that they liked and it happened to be for sale. Well, the people that we met who were actually selling their home, The gentleman was a major on the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department. They are the nicest couple that to this day I've ever met. So they met my family. They were tremendous help. They helped us with this process of buying a home. But more importantly, watching them help us and go out of their way. Eventually, they found out that we had no car. So they helped us find me a car. Them helping is what made me realize that I wanted to do that for the rest of my career. That's the career I wanted to go to. I was too young at that time, but he talked to me about the Cadet program that the Kansas City, Kansas Police Department had, and I was impressed. I waited, and as soon as I turned 18, I applied.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you were a cadet for 3 years before going into the academy?
Yes, I started as soon as I could. I was a cadet. I was 19, actually. And then after that, as soon as I turned 21, I entered the academy.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's a good program to get young people involved. I know there's been a lot of departments around the country have had programs to get people before they were old enough to really join the academy to, get them involved and maybe even get them, whether it was volunteer or they actually got a paycheck in some cases, to kind of get them on board and get them familiarized before they actually went to the police academy. And that's really neat. Did that help you? Do you feel like that's been a benefit to you in your career that you started out young?
Absolutely. The cadet program that we have is one of the most amazing things that I wish every teenager would be a part of. You saw the department as a whole, and you kind of start on the bottom and you work your way up. You get to meet people, you get to watch people how they work, but more importantly, you realize where the hard work can take you. You see people around you, so it really is a great program.
Yeah. You were impressed by the kindness of that police officer that helped your family find a home and find a vehicle. Do you feel like in your career you've been able to return that kindness or pay forward that kindness to other people? Have you had opportunities like that as an officer?
I sure hope so, because I try every single day. That has been something ever since I've been here. I remember this story and I tried. I've tried it as an officer on the streets. Even to this day, that's my goal. How can I help either citizens or the officers around me?
Sure.
Because it made a huge difference. I was 1 foot away. Like, who knows where I would have been if it was not for him.
Yeah. You're bilingual. Actually, how many languages do you speak?
So I speak two, and I'm conversational in Spanish, but I'm not fluent.
Okay.
I could kind of hold a conversation.
Right. So did you have opportunity in law enforcement to ever use your native language?
I have, just recently, within a couple of months, and it was rather inspiring, because the minute that I went to this home and I spoke, I felt like they felt like I was family.
Right.
It was just like we knew each other forever, and it made it easier for them, because it can be a scary thing. They didn't speak that much English either. So to have a police officer come in that speaks their language, like, you could just tell it made a huge difference for them.
Did they know you were coming, or were they surprised when you suddenly were able to speak their language?
They were very surprised. So they did not realize I was coming. I had heard the call, and the officers were actually asking for a translator. I was driving, so I said, I'm going to go out there. I recognized the names, being from the same country. So when I came in and I spoke, it was a relief, almost a relief factor.
Yeah, probably meant a lot to them.
Yeah.
You're a cadet at the police department, and you'd only been in the country for like 8 years. So what doubts about yourself did you have that you had to then overcome as a young person starting out a career in law enforcement? You're an immigrant. English is your second language. What bothered you the most? Like, which one of those was maybe the biggest hurdle to you or biggest obstacle to you?
So there were a few. One of them would be definitely the language. Even though I learned English, I felt like can I speak good enough to do this job? Can I succeed with English not being my first language, it's always a insecurity for a lot of people that were not born speaking English to begin with. For me, it was anyways. Also, it's the unknown. Different culture, different laws, rules. How can I do this? Not being from here, I didn't know if I was behind because I started school so late. I was in 6th grade. So did I miss on a lot of education that the academy may require me to have?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Were you more comfortable with written tests or verbal tests?
Verbal.
That was better for you?
That was better for me, actually, than written test. Because at that time, I was still having to kind of translate it in my head. It didn't come naturally. Now, when I read in English or write in English, it's just English.
Right.
But in the beginning stages, you're almost having to translate it in your head.
Right.
When you speak a different language.
Okay.
So it was definitely like education part. Can I do this? Which turned out, yes, they prepare you. Like, it's not intimidating like I thought it would be. The language also.
Okay. What about being a police officer? There's always the physical side of it. You have to learn defensive tactics and how to fight and how to control people, put hands on people, control them. You're not a very large female. What was that like for you going through the police academy?
So before I applied, it was intimidating in a way. I didn't work out. I was just not in that lifestyle. But within my first week, I knew I could do this. They start you off very, very easily, and you would be amazed how much you can build up. Yep. The most important part is, even for being a small female, it's the confidence they instill in you by training. So that's very important because I don't think I had that before. And I feel like the academy has helped me as a person too, not just as a police officer. It's the confidence that the training really gives you that, yes, you can do this.
You have advanced up through your career. Tell me, just kind of give me a brief overview of what you've done in your career and how you've been promoted.
So I started as a cadet. After that, I went into the police academy and I did patrol work for 5 years. I worked the afternoons and midnights. After that, I wanted to be a detective or a sergeant, but I was leaning more towards detective. I took the promotion test and I was promoted to a detective. I was a detective for 5 years. I did night.
And in our department, a detective is equal to a sergeant. And I know that's not true everywhere, but that is a big deal. You go from a silver badge to a gold badge, and that's a promotion to become a detective in KCK.
It is. We are one of the few departments that do it like that still. Yeah. But yes, it is a promotion. And
were your parents proud?
Oh, so proud. Very proud. They could tell that I just love my job. So I think that's what made them happy. And just to see me promote. Mm-hmm. I did that about 5 years. I did night response work, which is any type of crime that happens between my hours, for example, were 8 to 4. Yep. That was a lot of fun. I learned a lot.
Sure.
And then I took the captain's promotional test. And I was a captain for 4 years. I moved around. I did patrol. I did communications, some more patrol, operations bureau. And then just this year, I was promoted to major.
Well, congratulations.
As far as like the rank, I don't ever look at it as I want to be the deputy chief. I want to be the chief. I am enjoying the rank that I'm in. I've enjoyed being a police officer. I've enjoyed being a detective and a captain. And I worked hard and it just naturally happened.
Yeah. You also married a police officer.
That's right. We've been married for 11 years.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome. If you're talking to a young American who was born in another country and wants to become a police officer, but maybe they're a little hesitant, they're a little unsure of themselves if they are going to be able to be successful. You've been successful. What would you tell them?
yes, you could do it. Use all of those experiences you've had from coming here and turn them into something great. It's what makes you unique. It's what makes you succeed if you work really, really hard. It could mean that it could look intimidating at first, but the police department gets you ready. It really does. It transforms you as a person, but it gives you the tools to make you succeed. I would encourage anybody to give it a try. It is a great career. And I do think the experiences of being the immigrant make you work hard, very hard. If you didn't have things, you could see that in other people too, and you can work harder to give back to the community.
Yeah, and to help people who are in our community, but they're a little bit lost and they have a language barrier, and you'd be naturally sympathetic to that. You would understand where they're coming from.
Yes. Plus, you get a lot of practice. You have to talk to people, so you can practice your English. You're always on calls for service, so you kind of get better at it.
Do you think your English has improved just in the time you've been a cop?
Oh, I believe so.
Wonderful.
100%.
Yeah.
We talk 60% of the 70% of the time.
Yeah.
I do believe so.
When I was first around you, I didn't know that you were an immigrant because your last name was Magee, and that just sounds Irish or Scottish or something. That, I didn't assume you were from another country. And most of the things you say, I don't hear an accent. A few words you say, I still like, oh, that kind of sounds European. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would have never known. And so you fit right in here.
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. What's the best part of being a police officer?
The best part about being a police officer is really making a difference. And that might sound so cliche, but a lot of times police officers don't even see it many times until like maybe even years pass by. The best part is going into the chaos. Most of the time when police officers are on scene, people are either sad or hurt or mad. So for the police officer to come into the situation and be able to calm it down or at least give it some sense of kindness, I think that's the best part about our job. It's just all about being kind and humble and helping people.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Thank you for coming in today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to thank Violetta for coming in and talking to me. When families are forced to move across the world to another country and learn to speak a different language, it's usually because there's been quite a bit of pain. And so sharing a story about immigration is often a story that still has a lot of open wounds. I appreciate Violetta's sensitivity to that, and I appreciate her willingness to talk about her own story so as to encourage other officers. When I told the major that I don't hear an accent, I should have clarified that I don't hear a foreign accent in everything she says. I actually do hear a bit of Texas drawl from the short time that she spent there learning English, and I hear it in the pacing of her syllables, and there are several words and phrases that she uses that I also hear a Midwestern, very Kansas City kind of accent. It's only when she skips the word the or moves the vowels up to the front of her mouth that her speech maybe sounds a little bit foreign to my ears. But even if she sounds to you like she's not from around this neck of the woods, I want to point out that that hasn't stopped her from rising through the ranks and having a very successful law enforcement career. A language barrier won't stop you either. And if you have a story of law enforcement as a first-generation immigrant, please contact me. I'd love to talk to you. On the next episode of Hey Chaplain, we talk to Matt Landfair about training when training opportunities are not easy to come by. Let's say you're a young cop and you have just bought your first house. Naturally, you have a big, beautiful, new, shiny pickup truck because that's required. You maybe have a spouse, maybe you have your first child on the way. Where do you find the money and the time to go 2 or 3 states away to a class? How does that even happen?
With a lot of difficulty. Most cops, to include me early on, we all had to have second jobs just to maintain And so this wasn't something that we could just go out and do on a whim. It would have to be planned out.
Yeah.
It would be, you know what, a year from now, this is where I want to be. I want to go to this place. This is how much I need to spend. This is how much I need to save. This is how I'm going to do it. And also, wife has to be on board. Or whoever you live with has to be on board so they're aware. Because, all of a sudden, $5,000's out of the account. What just happened?
Right.
They don't like that. Just so you know.
No.
But having a plan is kind of important.
Well, a lot of officers say $5,000. $5,000. There's no way that does not exist.
It's true.
And there's no time to take off, because working that second job, you're working 6 or 7 days a week. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host and our guest and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. If you like this episode, please share it with a cop or someone who loves a cop. Thank you for listening to Hey Chaplain, and as always, pray for peace in our city.